I'm sorry, Emma, but we both know you only got this job because of me. Daniel's voice cut through the conference room like glass. At first, I thought I'd misheard him. We were in front of the entire project team, my first strategy meeting as their new manager, and he was smiling, that smug half-smile he used when he wanted to look harmless. I mean, he continued, pretending to joke, let's be honest, I basically trained her for this position. Laughter rippled awkwardly around the table. No one dared meet my eyes. My throat burned, but I forced my face to stay neutral. He had never spoken to me like that before. Not in public. Not ever. This was the man who used to bring me coffee before client pitches, who told me I was the smartest woman he knew. Now he was trying to chip away at my credibility in front of everyone. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips as I answered, calm but cold. Then I guess you trained me better than you thought, Daniel. Let's continue. He smirked, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, maybe even fear. That meeting changed everything between us. The office power couple everyone admired was cracking apart, and people were starting to notice. After the meeting ended, I gathered my notes with shaking hands. My assistant, Maya, touched my arm gently. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Daniel left the room without looking back, and I knew this was just the beginning. We'd been together for 2 years, inseparable since our first week at Sterling & Co. People called us the corporate dream team. We pushed each other, supported each other, and when we started dating, everyone said it made sense. But now, standing in that empty conference room, I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. Had he always been like this, hiding behind charm and compliments? Or had my promotion revealed something darker that was always there? I packed my laptop slowly, trying to process what just happened. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Can we talk tonight?" I stared at it for a long moment, then turned off my phone. 2 years earlier, everything was different. Daniel and I met on orientation day, both fresh analysts eager to prove ourselves. He had this energy that filled every room he entered, confident, charming, always ready with a joke. I was quieter, more focused on the work than the performance. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. We'd grab lunch together, brainstorm over coffee, compete over who could land the next big client. It was healthy competition back then, the kind that made us both better. When he finally asked me out after closing a huge deal together, I said yes without hesitation. Our relationship became the talk of the office, the golden couple climbing the ladder together. But even then, there were small signs I chose to ignore. The way his smile would fade when clients praised my presentations. How he'd change the subject whenever I mentioned career goals. I told myself he was just competitive, that it was part of his drive. Looking back now, I wonder if I was making excuses even then, convincing myself that love could smooth over the cracks forming beneath our perfect surface. When our manager, Karen, announced her retirement, both Daniel and I applied for the position. We celebrated that night over takeout and cheap wine, joking about which one of us would get it. I remember him saying, "If it's you, I'll be proud. Really." And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We were partners in everything. The interview process dragged on for weeks, presentations, leadership tests, meetings with senior management. I threw myself into preparing not to beat Daniel, but to prove to myself that I could do this. When HR finally called, I was in the break room with Daniel. I answered, and when the words, "Congratulations, Emma, you're our new department manager," came through the line, my heart stopped. I hung up, grinning, ready to tell him, but the smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. "That's great," he said after a long pause. "Guess I'll be reporting to you now." He laughed, but it was hollow, empty of the warmth I'd grown used to. That night, he barely spoke to me. He turned away in bed, muttering something about office politics. I reached for him, but he pulled away. I told myself he just needed time. The first few weeks as manager were harder than I expected. Not because of the job itself, but because of Daniel. At first, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I'd smile at him in meetings, ask his opinion on projects, include him in decisions. But he started questioning everything I did. "Are you sure that's the best approach?" he'd say, loud enough for others to hear. Or, "Karen never did it that way." Each comment felt like a small cut, designed to make me doubt myself. He started staying late, working on projects I wasn't included in. When I asked about them, he'd say he didn't want to bother the boss after hours. The distance between us grew wider every day. At home, he was cold and distant. At work, he was professionally polite but subtly undermining. I confronted him one evening after work. "Daniel, what's going on? Why are you doing this?" He didn't even look up from his laptop. "I just don't like being treated like some assistant," he said flatly. "You changed the minute you got that title." Those words hit me hard because I knew they weren't true. Then came the small betrayals. He'd forget to copy me on important client emails. He'd accidentally send outdated data before my presentations. Each time, he'd apologize with that same smirk that told me the truth. It wasn't a mistake. It was sabotage, carefully disguised as carelessness. I started double-checking everything, creating backup files, building systems to protect myself from his interference. It was exhausting, maintaining our relationship while defending myself at work. My friends outside the office noticed the change in me. "You seem stressed," my best friend Lisa said over dinner one night. I wanted to tell her everything, but admitting Daniel was sabotaging me felt like admitting I'd been wrong about him all along. So I smiled and blamed it on the new job, but the truth was eating me alive. Every day I woke up next to someone who was actively trying to make me fail. Every night I fell asleep wondering how we'd gotten here. The man I loved was becoming my biggest obstacle, and I didn't know how to fix it, or if I even should. It all came to a head 3 weeks later. We were hosting a presentation for a major client, one that could define my first quarter as manager. I'd spent days preparing, checking every detail, rehearsing every slide. But when I opened the slide deck on the conference screen, I froze. Half the data was missing. The charts were gone. The notes had been replaced with random text that made no sense. The client stared. My boss frowned. Daniel sat across the table. His expression completely unreadable. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I closed the corrupted file and spoke from memory, reconstructing the presentation on the spot. Somehow, I managed to hold it together long enough to get through the meeting. But the moment the client left, I turned to Daniel. "Did you touch my files?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Maybe you shouldn't keep everything in one folder," he said casually. "Accidents happen." Something inside me snapped. Not anger, clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. "Don't you dare," I whispered, stepping closer. "Don't you dare stand there and pretend this was an accident." He smirked, that infuriating expression I'd once found charming. "Careful, boss, people might think you're losing your temper." That was the moment I stopped trying to save him, stopped trying to fix us. From that day on, I decided I wasn't going to survive Daniel's jealousy. I was going to outsmart it. I stopped speaking to Daniel outside of work requirements. Not out of anger, but out of strategy. Silence became my weapon. At work, I answered his questions with the same professional tone I used for everyone else, calm, polite, unbothered. It drove him insane. He'd make snide remarks during meetings just to get a reaction. I'd simply nod and move on, but I wasn't ignoring him. I was documenting him. Every missed report, every snarky comment, every email accidentally left unsent, I saved them all. I started a folder named Team Notes, but I knew what it really was, my insurance policy. When people crossed me before, I used to fight with words. This time, I chose proof. One afternoon, I overheard Daniel joking with 2 analysts by the coffee machine. "Emma's drowning," he said, laughing. "She's in over her head. Give it a few months, she'll crash." They didn't know I was standing behind the divider, holding my cup so tightly the lid nearly cracked. I stood there, heart pounding, listening to him tear me down to people I was supposed to lead. Then I walked out like I hadn't heard a thing, because now I knew exactly what I needed to do. Let him dig his own grave while I built an unshakable foundation beneath my feet. That evening, I stayed late organizing my documentation. Every screenshot, every email, every project timeline where Daniel had deliberately caused delays. I arranged them chronologically, added context notes, and backed everything up to 3 different locations. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready with facts. My phone buzzed, another text from Daniel asking if we could talk. I deleted it without reading the full message. There was nothing left to say, not anymore. 2 weeks later, an email from HR landed in my inbox. "Emma, we've received an anonymous report regarding potential favoritism and hostile behavior. Please see attached documentation." My hands went cold as I opened the attachment. It was a PDF filled with screenshots of old Slack messages between Daniel and me from months ago. But they'd been cropped and rearranged to make it look like I was belittling him, micromanaging, even using our relationship to control him. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Daniel had crossed a line I didn't think he'd cross. This wasn't petty rivalry anymore. This was character assassination, carefully planned and executed. I forced myself to read every line, looking for weaknesses in his fabrication. Then I noticed it. The timestamps didn't match the actual message history. He'd faked them, but he'd been sloppy about it. That night, I stayed in the office after everyone left. The city lights bled through the blinds as I sat there, hands trembling over the keyboard. I opened my documentation folder and added the fake screenshots to a new section I titled Pattern of Misconduct. Then I did something I'd been avoiding. I reached out to it. I need a routine access check on my shared folders, I told it, keeping my tone casual. Just want to make sure security protocols are working properly. They agreed without suspicion. By the next day, I had my answer. It sent me a discreet message. Confirmed multiple unauthorized access attempts to your private folder, user, D. Robbins. Daniel had been breaking into my files for weeks, probably looking for ammunition to use against me. Now I had proof, technical logs, timestamps, everything documented. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. He wasn't just trying to undermine me in meetings anymore. He was actively sabotaging my work and trying to frame me for misconduct. The man I'd loved, the man I'd built a life with, had become someone I barely recognized. That evening, I prepared a comprehensive report for HR and my boss, Martin, but I didn't send it yet. I wanted to wait to see how far Daniel would take this. Sometimes the best strategy is patience, letting your opponent make more mistakes while you quietly build your case. And Daniel was making plenty of mistakes. When quarterly reviews came around, the rumor mill was spinning hard. I'd heard whispers, people saying I'd changed, that I was too strict now, that my relationship with Daniel was affecting the workplace dynamic. I knew exactly where those whispers started. When I sat down with Martin, our director, he hesitated before speaking. "Emma, I'll be honest," he said gently. "Some of the team feels uneasy. They say your relationship with Daniel has affected the workplace dynamic." I looked him straight in the eye. "Then you deserve the full picture." I opened my laptop and showed him everything. Every missed deadline Daniel had caused, every inappropriate remark he'd made, every project file he'd corrupted or accidentally deleted. All time-stamped, verified, factual. I also showed him the fake screenshots Daniel had submitted to HR and the evidence proving they were fabricated. Martin read in silence, his face growing tighter with each page. "Emma," he said finally, voice low, "you've handled this with more professionalism than most people would. Leave this with me." When I left his office, Daniel was standing by the copier. Our eyes met. He smirked, confident he was winning. I smiled back because he had no idea the ground beneath him was already cracking. The first domino fell quietly a few days later. It confirmed in writing that Daniel had accessed my files without authorization multiple times. That alone was a serious policy violation, but I still waited. I wanted more. That week, I made sure my shared folder was full of innocuous files, meeting templates, fake drafts, incomplete notes. Nothing important, but enough to look legitimate. I wanted to catch him in the act one more time. Late Thursday evening, I pretended to leave early. I packed up, walked out the front entrance, then circled back through the service stairwell. Through the glass wall, I saw him at my desk, logged into my computer. Reading through my files, he didn't even look nervous. He thought he was untouchable. I took a photo from the hallway, making sure the timestamp was visible, then left without making a sound. The next morning, I sent everything to IT and HR, the photo, the access logs, the pattern of behavior spanning weeks. By the afternoon, an official audit had begun. When Daniel found out, he thought it was random. He even laughed about it with colleagues. He wouldn't be laughing for long. The audit results came back on a Wednesday. Martin called Daniel into his office, door closed, blinds drawn. The entire floor went quiet. 30 minutes later, Daniel emerged pale and furious. He stormed straight toward me, eyes blazing. "What the hell did you do?" he hissed, low enough that others couldn't hear clearly. I didn't even flinch. "Me, nothing, but you might want to check your email." His jaw clenched, working like he was chewing words he couldn't say aloud. Around us, people pretended not to watch, but everyone was listening. "You set me up," he whispered. I leaned forward slightly. "No, Daniel, you set yourself up. I just made sure it was documented." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he laughed bitter, empty, broken. "You think you've won?" I straightened my blazer and picked up my coffee. No, I think I've survived. And to him, that was so much worse. When he left the office that afternoon, everyone knew something had changed. The golden boy of Sterling and Co. was officially tarnished, and the woman he'd tried to destroy was still standing. Daniel wasn't fired immediately. Instead, he was removed from 2 major projects and placed under performance review. The protective shield of his charm and reputation was finally gone. For days, he avoided me completely. Then one evening, as I was packing up to leave, he appeared in my doorway. "You told them I accessed your files," he said flatly. "I didn't tell them anything," I replied, not looking up from my bag. "They found it on their own, that's what audits do. You could have stopped it." "I could have," I said quietly, finally meeting his eyes, "if you hadn't started it." For the first time, his expression faltered. Not anger, shame. It flickered across his face for just a moment before disappearing. "Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts," he muttered before walking away. What he didn't realize was that I didn't want the spotlight. I never had. I just wanted peace. I wanted to do my job without constantly looking over my shoulder. And the only way to get that peace was for him to finally fall far enough that he couldn't reach me anymore. Within a month, the atmosphere at Sterling & Co. had completely shifted. People who used to treat Daniel like a star now kept their distance. His charm, the thing that had always carried him through difficult situations, didn't work anymore. Meanwhile, my department was thriving. The clients who'd been skeptical after that first presentation disaster were now signing contract extensions. The team was more collaborative, more productive. Martin called me into his office one afternoon. "Emma, whatever you're doing, it's working. You've completely stabilized this department." I smiled. "Thank you, it's just about clear communication and consistent structure." But I knew the truth. It wasn't structure. It was subtraction, removing the chaos so competence could finally breathe. That evening, I passed Daniel in the hallway. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. "You really turned them all against me, didn't you?" he muttered. I paused. "No, Daniel. You did that all by yourself." He laughed under his breath, bitter and hollow. "You're not who I thought you were." I looked him straight in the eye. "Neither are you." Then I walked away, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt free. The promotion email came unexpectedly. Martin called me into his office, actually smiling this time. "Emma, corporate has noticed your numbers. There's an opening for regional operations lead. It's a significant jump, and they want to consider you for it." For a moment, I couldn't find words. This position was beyond anything I'd imagined when I first took the manager role. Regional operations lead meant real influence, real power. "Daniel will hate this," was my first thought, and immediately I hated myself for thinking it. His opinion shouldn't matter anymore. That night, I stayed late staring at the city lights outside my office window. I thought about how far I'd come and how I'd almost let someone else convince me I didn't deserve to be here. If the company wanted me to lead at a regional level, I'd do it. But I promised myself one thing: I'd lead with integrity, not vengeance. The next morning, when Daniel heard the news through the office grapevine, he didn't congratulate me. He just said quietly, "You'll regret taking that job." The way he said it, like a threat, told me his jealousy hadn't finished burning yet, not even close. A week later, I understood what he meant. I was in a budget meeting when Martin pulled me aside, his expression grim. "Emma, something's come up. We received another report claiming you falsified project metrics to make your numbers look better." My stomach dropped. "What?" He handed me the report. Anonymous again. No solid evidence, just accusations written with enough detail and venom to sound convincing. Someone had clearly spent time making this look legitimate. I didn't need to guess who wrote it. This time, though, I was ready. Weeks earlier, I'd implemented a transparent project tracking system, one that every manager could access. Every number, every edit, every change was logged with timestamps visible to everyone. When I showed Martin the tracking system, he nodded slowly. "Good work, whoever tried this." It backfired badly. I exhaled, feeling both relief and bone-deep exhaustion. Daniel wasn't just jealous anymore. He was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. That night, he was waiting for me in the parking lot. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I just wanted us to be equals again." "You had that," I said softly. "You just couldn't handle it." He stepped closer. "You're not better than me." "I never said I was," I whispered. "You did." 2 days later, Daniel didn't show up to work. Then HR sent an all-staff email that made everyone's phones buzz simultaneously. Effective immediately, Daniel Robbins will no longer be employed with Sterling & Co. We thank him for his contributions and wish him well in future endeavors." The office went completely silent. Some people looked relieved. Others just seemed uncomfortable, unsure how to process what had happened. I sat at my desk, staring at the email, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and closure twisting inside me. It wasn't satisfaction. It was simply the end of something that had been painful for too long. That afternoon, Martin stopped by my desk. "He took confidential client data home on a personal drive," he explained quietly. "Company policy is clear. There was no coming back from that." I nodded slowly, processing this final piece of information. "I understand." When I went home that evening, the apartment we used to share felt different. His side of the closet was empty. His coffee mug was gone from the kitchen counter. For the first time in months, everything was quiet, truly deeply quiet. And in that silence, I realized something important. I didn't win by beating him. I won by surviving him. The day after Daniel's dismissal, the office felt lighter. Emails were shorter and clearer. Meetings ran smoother. Even the air seemed easier to breathe without all that tension. But inside, I was exhausted. Every victory came with a strange ache, like I'd climbed a mountain barefoot and my feet were still bleeding. At lunch, my friend Natalie from accounting leaned over. "You know, it's kind of poetic," she said. "He tried to bring you down and ended up destroying himself instead." I forced a smile. "Yeah. Poetic." But that night, alone in my apartment, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. We'd once talked about buying a house together, traveling to places we'd only dreamed about, maybe even getting married someday. Now his name made me physically flinch. I opened my laptop to a blank email draft to Daniel. Then I stared at the empty message box for a long time. No words came that felt right, so I deleted the draft, because some goodbyes don't need to be said out loud. Some endings speak for themselves. In the silence they leave behind. A month later, I was officially appointed regional operations lead. They held a small ceremony in the main conference hall, just coffee, muffins, and polite applause from colleagues. Martin gave a short speech. "Emma has shown remarkable resilience, integrity, and results during a challenging time. We're fortunate to have her leading this expansion." I thanked everyone, feeling both proud and nervous. Leadership at this level meant new responsibilities, new pressures, new eyes constantly watching. After the event, a junior employee named Sam pulled me aside. "I wanted to say something," he said quietly. "When everything happened with Daniel, a lot of us were scared to speak up about what we saw. But watching you handle it so calmly, never losing your professionalism, it showed us what real leadership actually looks like." It was such a simple statement, but it hit deep. For months, I'd been questioning whether I'd done the right thing, wondering if I'd been too harsh or not harsh enough. That one sentence from Sam erased every doubt. When I got home, I finally let myself celebrate. Just a quiet dinner, a glass of wine, and a moment to simply breathe and be proud of myself. 22. But my peace was short-lived. As I scrolled through my phone later that night, a text appeared from an unknown number. "You really think this is over?" I froze, staring at the screen. The number wasn't saved, but I didn't need to check the area code to know who it was. Daniel. 2 weeks passed with no more messages. I convinced myself I'd imagined the threat, that it was just one last desperate attempt to get under my skin, until HR called. "Emma," the HR director said carefully, "we received an application from Daniel Robbins for a supplier role at one of our partner firms. He listed you as a reference and mentioned your name several times in his interviews. He spoke about your bias against him. The company wanted to verify his story." That word, bias, stung more than any insult he'd thrown at me before, because it wasn't true. I'd documented everything, followed every policy, given him more chances than he deserved. I kept my voice calm. "Please tell them the complete truth. My records are available. His aren't nearly as clean." When I hung up, I realized something chilling. This wasn't about getting a job. This was about power, about rewriting history so he could be the victim instead of the villain. 3 months later, I attended a national leadership conference in Chicago. I was scheduled to present on managing workplace conflict. Yes, the irony wasn't lost on me. Halfway through my presentation, I caught a familiar face in the audience. Daniel. He wasn't smiling, just watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. After my session ended, I stepped off stage with my heart pounding. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets, looking thinner than I remembered. "Nice speech," he said. "You always were good at pretending to care about people." I took a deep breath. Daniel, you need to move on, we both do. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. I already have, I'm consulting now, and word gets around fast in this industry, especially stories about the woman who replaced her boyfriend and destroyed his career. My pulse spiked. If you're threatening me, I'm just saying, he interrupted with that old familiar smirk. Reputations are fragile things. They can break so easily. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the crowd. And for the first time since he'd left Sterling and Co., I felt genuinely scared. Not of him physically, but of what his bitterness might still be capable of doing. Over the next few weeks, whispers started spreading through my industry network. Someone claimed I'd taken credit for my partner's projects. Another person said I'd used HR policies to manipulate my way up the ladder. It was Daniel's style, careful, calculated, always just beyond the reach of definitive proof. But this time, I didn't hide or wait. I gathered every project file, every timestamp, every email. I built a comprehensive digital timeline of my work, factual, verifiable, completely untouchable. Then I called the head of the conference committee who'd invited me to speak. Someone is trying to damage my professional reputation, I said calmly, and I can prove exactly who and why. I sent them everything, my documentation, the HR records, the audit results from Sterling and Co. Within a week, Daniel's so-called consulting opportunities started drying up. The companies he'd been courting pulled back quickly once they understood the full situation. No one wanted to risk their reputation on someone with his track record. The gossip stopped. The whispers faded. And when the next industry newsletter came out, my face was on the front page. From crisis to leadership, how one manager rebuilt trust in a fractured workplace. 6 months later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Inside was a single page. You were right about everything. I became exactly what I swore I'd never be, bitter, petty, small. I'm leaving the city, starting over somewhere no one knows my name. I hope you find the peace I couldn't. D. I folded it quietly and placed it in a drawer. No anger, no triumph, just a strange sense of closure. That weekend, I met with a small committee to finalize plans for a mentorship program, specifically designed to help young women navigate workplace politics and gender dynamics in management. As we reviewed the proposal, I caught my reflection in the conference room window. I looked different. Calmer, stronger, more certain of who I was. The story that began with heartbreak and betrayal had transformed into something meaningful: growth, resilience, grace under pressure. Daniel lost everything trying to prove he was superior. I gained everything by refusing to become like him, by choosing documentation over destruction, facts over feelings. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction at all. It's simply becoming untouchable, unshakable, undeniably successful on your own terms. And that's exactly what I did.